just a quick before and after. And as you can see, all same steps. I worked on the hair a little bit, then color corrections, dodging and burning. Maybe I should zoom in a little bit closer so you can see the face. Dodging and burning. Then color corrections, a little bit more color grading type, and then a little bit of shapes. And then the eyes. My favorite thing to do with the eyes, just add a little bit of luminosity in the iris. So I'm going to delete all of this and show you how I set up my dodging and burning. So normally you can, there are a few different methods, and you can use curves, darken, brighten, cover them with a black mask, and then uncover them as you progress. You can use 50% mid-gray layer and then paint on it with a white brush, with a black brush. But even if I used to use the mid-gray layer, but even when I did that, I would still have my dodging layer and my burning layer. I just always try to separate my steps, so if I screw up at any point, I can just remove that and continue. So I don't have to remove all of my work, but I can just eliminate more repetition. So I work with the curves, and I don't do this every time. I have the panels that we've created with my Retouching Academy team, and everything is done by just a click of, just one click, and everything gets set up. But I will show you manually how I do that. Obviously, you can create your own action, so you don't have to repeat this every time. And it's such a huge, actions are a huge time saver. So dodging, I usually just grab, and this is something that you most likely have seen a million times because everyone does it the same way. Whoever does it through curves, they always the same setup. So a little bit brighter in the midtones. I usually do it just about there. And then I invert the mask, and then I add one more curve, and then I darken it a little bit, and I will invert the mask. So this will be my burn, which is darkening, and this will be my dodge, which is brightening. I usually actually have my dodge layer at the top. Then I will put them into one folder, dodging and burning. And then here, I actually also, we've added some presets right here, which is just a simple soft brush with everything pen pressure turned off. And it's at 1% flow and 100% opacity. And what it does is that you can find a problem to solve, and you can just brush over a darkness that you need to remove and not lift up the pen, and just continue brushing and brushing and brushing to brighten it. So what happens here is that you're uncovering the mask, and that brightness is coming through, so it becomes brighter. And you can always, if you have overdone anything, you can always adjust your opacity, or you can even, if you need to brighten everything, you can just work with, you can feather the mask, you can decrease the intensity so everything will be brightened. So there are a lot of things that you can do. You can zoom in very, very close and work on those smaller issues. I use my keyboard shortcuts a lot, so I just hit a number. For example, to change opacity, I just hit any number. So 1 will be 10%, 40% by clicking on 4, 0 will make it 100. And to change your flow, you just hold Shift, press Shift, and then you just hit a number and the flow is changing. So if I'm working on something that is a little bit contrastier than the rest, then with 1% flow, it will take me a very long time to brighten, something that is as dark as this. So I will just hit, say, 20% flow, and I will just work quickly on something like this. Or 10 if it's too much, and work on something like this. It is a very, very long process, and actually, if you would like to see how it works, if I had an extra hour here, I could continue working, and you would not even see it in real time because it's kind of building up, and it's best visible when you watch it in time lapse. And that video where I talk about my selection of the brushes on that page, I actually deliberately created a time lapse video where I work on just a flat file with patches, and I just dodge and burn, and it's time lapse video, so you can actually see the effects. Because in reality, when you're sitting there and dodge and burning, especially at 1% flow, that is a very long process, and that's why it takes a very long time. But the precision that you can get with this technique is amazing. And so one more thing that I wanted to add here, by adding that visual aid, a new layer that you can, if you change to soft light, say here, and then Photoshop offers you, do you want me to fill it with soft light, neutral color, 50% gray? I say yes, and then I go back and actually change it to color, and everything becomes black and white. So now I'm actually seeing those patches a little bit better. I just tweak. They're just right there. But what I also can do to help my eyes to even see them even better, I can add one more curve here and change the contrast. So I'm not actually affecting the color contrast because I'm looking through that color layer. That is the correct visual aid. But I can add some contrast so I can see those things a lot easier. So with my brush, I can go ahead and, or I see there is a question. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask what size brush you're working with. It looks really small.
Yeah, usually if I'm working this close, it will be a very, very small brush. It depends on the image, on the size of the image. In my case, it's 4 pixels right now. It can be smaller, it can be larger. If you have a huge image, if you shoot medium format, then obviously your smallest brush will still be bigger than mine. And one very, very important thing I also want to add is I find it much, the results will be much better if you start with, if you start dodge and burn and zoomed out. So if you zoom out like this and look, set up your contrast or darkness, whatever is helpful. For example, if I start working on just the brightest part of the face, I will set up, I will change my help aid, my visual aid layer to the point that I can actually see those changes in the values. And while I'm working here, I can, oops, not here, but on dodge layer, I will work on those patches, on larger problems to remove them. And once that is done, not that I wait until I'm completely done with the large patches. If I see something that is smaller, I will zoom in and work on that specific area. Then I will zoom out again and continue working on this scale. And obviously there are problems that you have to really zoom in, and that's why it's called pixel level dodging and burning, because a lot of little things like here, obviously you need to be, to make sure that you're very precise with your brush strokes, you need to be zoomed in very closely. And again, by holding shift and hitting 0.3, oh no, 0.3, no, come on, 0.3, I get to flow 3%. Just a little bit more of the color coming out of my pen, so I can move a little bit faster with my dodging and burning. So, you know, just remember you've got all of these controls, and as you progress, sometimes you need a little bit faster results so you can increase your flow, and you will be actually affecting the patches that you're working on faster. But sometimes the differences that you're working on are so subtle that even 1% flow can be too much. You start seeing, even with one brush stroke, you already see that you're brightening too much. So what you can do is lower your opacity. That way, the intensity of your brush stroke will be even lower than that. So here, for example, I'm looking at this area. I do have darker little patches that I would brighten with while working on the dodge layer. But I also see some brighter, like this and this here, and those brighter patches, I will actually burn a little bit. So the idea here is by actually keeping in mind the initial light distribution. So everything should be getting from brighter to darker. But all those little imperfections, that little bumps, little patches that pop up here and there, we need to even them out by something that is darker, we bring it up by brightening, and something that is brighter, catching more light because it's a little bump, we darken it a little bit and it goes down. There is a lot more that involves color corrections that will have to be done if the changes are very drastic, because usually the shadows are a little bit more saturated, so if you brighten them, you will get a lot difference in the color shifts happen often when you do a lot of dodging and burning by changing the values by a lot. The easiest way is to use the color correction adjustment layers that I mentioned yesterday: selective color, hue and saturation on colorize mode, or even just a new layer set to color mode, and sample from the nearest color and just painting right on top of that area that you need to fix.
So I'm not a retoucher, so I'm just curious, what percentage better quality do you feel retouching at that pixel level gives you? I mean, is it like the gold standard that you have to do for beauty retouching?
Do you mean the zooming?
No, doing the dodging and burning at a pixel level to retouch the tonality as opposed to other tools.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what percentage. What do you mean, like the flow percentage, or?
No, just the technique of doing that pixel level dodging and burning as opposed to some other technique to.
Well, this is something that I spend most of the time doing when I'm working on the face so close, because you can't really compare it to anything else. I mean, the frequency separation, yes, you kind of can do those things with the frequency separation, but it is more destructive. And besides, there are frequencies that you may even out, not really realizing it when you're working with the frequency separation. And so when you look at the picture, you end up seeing the texture, and then kind of everything is even underneath that texture. And that looks very, very fake. When you're dodging and burning, you can get to that point, but you have to spend a lot of hours to get there. Accidentally, you won't just end up there. But with the frequency separations, the chances that you can accidentally just ruin the image by evening out those frequencies is very high. So dodge and burn is the technique of professional retouchers. And it is the high-end, if you will, the high-end retouching technique for, especially for beauty and commercial beauty images. But the only problem that I see with it, it's just, it requires a lot of time and a lot of practice too. So for, again, I'm a photographer first and foremost. I do my own retouching. I also do retouching for clients, but I cannot afford spending 20 hours just dodging and burning. So I do, cheat sometimes and go to the frequency separation. But dodging and burning, when we talk about skin and texture and the evenness of the skin, the dodge and burn is absolutely necessary. I cannot replace it with anything else. So, well, yeah, of course, I didn't have enough time to actually do much to the image, but you can see that basically what it does is just brightening and darkening areas, and your choice of those areas can be on a global scale when you're removing or brightening those bigger shadows, like we did yesterday, but I did it with the frequency separation. Those shadows that we could see, it could have been done also with the dodging and burning. Here, this shadow, I can remove it with a large brush, but then when we get very, very close, zoom in very closely, we can also even out on the very local micro level, we can even out the skin texture. So I'm going to shut this photo, and I'm going to walk you guys through the rest of the retouching of this image, and I will just show you what exactly I normally do, because this is exactly the steps that I would do for any image. So here, the dodging and burning again. And then the next step was the eyes. I did show what I usually do with the eyes normally, so basically I will just flip through and you can see it. If I need to, I will darken the outline of the iris by just adding a new layer, sampling the color, the existing color, and just going around the iris with a soft brush, or depending on how sharp the actual outline is in the image. And I then add also a new layer set to overlay layer mode, and with a white brush, I usually just brighten a part of the iris just to add that light and saturation to the eyes, and it just always, it seems to make all portraits and any image of any face always looks better when the eyes are deeper and there is a little bit of light and color in the image. I did show yesterday also how I choose what part of the iris to brighten. It shouldn't be the entire iris that is bright. It should be always the opposite side of the catch light. If you look at the paintings, if you look at other photos where that happens, you will always see it, that the light goes through the eye and lands on the opposite side of the iris, on the opposite across the pupil. And then the eyelashes. Again, if your makeup artist has done a great job and the eyelashes are perfect, then you don't need to do anything. But sometimes it's really difficult to get to the outline or the roots of the eyelashes with a mascara brush. So and it also depends on the physical features of the model. Some models have very straight eyelashes, some have very curled and long eyelashes, some have short. So if your makeup artist couldn't get that to that very roots of the eyelashes, then you can just add a new layer, again sample from the existing color of the eyelash and just darken that area just a little bit. Make sure to adjust the opacity so you don't make it too dark. Always look at the darkest dark in your image, so that if the darkest black in your image is not complete Photoshop complete black, then make sure that when you're applying those eyelashes or anything with the makeup, you don't go darker than the darkest dark in your image already is. I hope it makes sense, but what I'm trying to say is I've seen so many times a beginner retoucher applying, using either eyelash brushes, which I used to use a lot too. Now I just paint them with just a brush stroke. But again, if you use a very, very dark black, they will stand out. Compared to the rest of the blacks in the image, you shouldn't go darker on the eyes. Okay, so we darken, we enhance the eye makeup, but we don't want to make it so overbearing that it just obviously retouched. We always want to make sure that everything looks like it hasn't been retouched. And so here, again, I'll just flip through. My usual workflow here with the eyelashes, just like I said, I just paint them. I don't even use pen pressure because I use such small brushes, so that I just brush. If I feel like the shape isn't nice, Command Z and do it again until I nail it. And the more you do it, the faster you will actually paint in. And I just try to kind of fill in the gaps between the existing eyelashes. If you don't feel like you can do something like that with your hand because you don't have painting background or you just can't, draw that beautiful eyelash, here's another method you can use. I've just added a new layer, pen tool, and then something like, I should probably zoom out. Let me do it again. Pen tool, and curve it so that it kind of looks like an eyelash, and it's much bigger. I will go ahead and find a brush that is hard enough, maybe size approximately, maybe a little bit larger, just about there. Then I will go into paths. This is the path that I just created with the pen tool, and I will stroke path and simulate pressure with the brush that I've just selected. And at this point, before I stroke it, I should make sure that the color of my brush actually is the existing color of the eyelashes or the eyebrows. So I will go ahead and stroke it. Oh, it should be full on flow. It was just the flow is so low that it was see-through. So I will stroke it again and come back to my layer. Actually, I have to step off the path and come back to my layer. Now Command T to call for the transform tool, and I will make it small, sweet and nice, and okay. And I can even remove one side of it, and there you go. Here's your perfect eyelash. You can also warp it a little bit if it's not warped enough, if it's not curving enough, and then you take it to where it belongs and place it and resize it just to make sure that it matches what already is there and set it to multiply so that it's darker. And then hold Alt and just move it, and then transform it again so that they're not repeating each other. And then hold Alt and move and create one more, and transform it again just a little bit so that our eyes, our viewers' eyes are very sensitive to patterns. So you don't want to create a few lashes that are exactly the same. So change the size, the angle, the curve a little bit, and nobody will ever see that it was done in post. And so on. Same can be done for the bottom eyelashes too. And when you zoom out, you can't even tell. Of course, when you're at home and you're more precise, you can make it just exactly the size of the eyelashes that you have there. When it comes to the eyebrows, I also paint them in, but I simply use just a new layer and a very small brush, sample from the color of the eyebrow. And what I do is, you can see just, she's got very dark eyebrows, so, and the makeup artist is just amazing. Everything was already done so great, so I didn't really have to do much, but you can't really control the gaps where the skin is more visible in the eyebrows. This is exactly where I fill them in. Like I said, with a small, very small brush, sample the color from the existing eyebrows. Usually I set it to multiply blending mode just to make sure that they're dark enough, my brush strokes are dark enough. Even if I accidentally sampled slightly different color, a little bit brighter, when everything is set, when the whole layer is set to multiply, I will make sure that I will fill in, darken those areas where the skin is visible. And it just makes the whole eyebrow just look finished. And if you have a little bit of, plucked eyebrows that were, taken care of a week ago, then you start seeing those little stumps there. That's just clone stamp tool. Never leave them in because it doesn't look good. It shouldn't be there, for any beautician will tell you that. So it's basically, if you are the photographer, tell your model to prepare for a beauty shoot. And again, on F-Stoppers, I have a very nice article about all the things that you can ask your model to do before a photo shoot, especially when it's a close-up beauty, because you can spend hours doing just her brows, while she could just spend $20 prepared for her shoot because she's a professional model, and come with beautiful eyebrows all prepared, no upper lip hair, which would be a disaster to many hours of work. Well, not hours, but still, it's work that you will have to invest. So if you're shooting for the model or with a model, or it's a commercial assignment, especially if it's a hired model from a modeling agency, they usually know that those things should be done. But if not, then, Photoshop is our friend to get everything done here. Lips, I know I have only 2 minutes, so I will quickly show you guys what I do with the lips. Basically, again, if the makeup artist is great, nothing needs to be done unless there are little things that are missing or the shape isn't precisely what you want it to be. Okay, here's my lips folder. Inside that folder, I worked on the outline, just clone stamp, very, very small clone stamp, zoomed in almost to this scale, and just go over and fill in. I deliberately not try to even out such things because I looked at the lips from afar and I make sure that it doesn't look too perfect, because you often can see sometimes if the outline is too perfect, and I used to do it a couple of years ago, I would just make it so perfect then it looks like the lips are floating on the face. They're not connected to the face. So now I know better, so I don't do that, and I try to keep some imperfections, not only with the lips, everywhere else. Just keep a couple of imperfections here and there, and it will trick your viewer into believing that, oh, that wasn't retouched because, the outline isn't too perfect. So that's exactly what we want to do. Then I worked with the color on color blending mode, sampled from the color that I wanted to apply, the color that had more yellows, and worked with that over the areas that were a little bit more purple and dark. to get more unified color across the lips. And then I, again, use my favorite selective color, and you can see that everything is, and it doesn't even have to be perfect. This is awful. But you can see that it doesn't have to be perfect even when you're fixing the colors. Some changes in the colors are perfectly normal, because if you ask any painter, they will show you a whole palette of colors that they're using to develop or to create a skin tone or even the lips. There will be 5, 6 colors. So not having it all one same color actually is the idea. You can't have it all exactly the same color because the shadows will be slightly different. The highlights will always be the color of the light. That's also one thing that I've noticed so many beginners disregard. The highlights in anything that is the specular highlights can only be the color of the light. So if the light was white, the highlights cannot be red. So if you just go over everything and paint the whole lips, including the highlights, with red, that's not how it is in reality. So, you know, keeping in mind all those things, observing everything, that's the goal. This is the lips that we had and lips that I'll get closer. And that's it. The last thing was just a little bit of shapes to make the lips look perfect. Then global dodging and burning. Global dodging and burning, usually I use it to add volume if something looks flat, or change, maybe reshape some things like the nose. You know, if you have a wide highlight, if you narrow it down with dodging and burning, it will actually make the viewer believe that the nose is narrower. If the highlight is wide, it means that the plane of the bridge of the nose is wide, which makes the viewer to believe that the nose is wide. So, you know, all those things, if you know those things and you can play around with highlights and shadows, you don't need your liquify tool anymore, unless you need to move the outlines of the body, of the face, of the shape. I do sometimes move the nostrils closer because it is flattering for a woman to have a narrower nose a little bit. So if the nostrils are too wide, I can just push closer, and smaller ears.